Izzo, what's his middle name? Look at that. She's already an expert.
I'm naming my child Ralph Waldo.
Yes. Well, because they're two different people. Yes. So, and I'll jump to this here in a second. He is born Ralph Waldo Ellison. He's named after Ralph Waldo Emerson by his father. His father is born in Oklahoma City, but Ellison grows up primarily in Indiana, in Gary, Indiana. His father is a construction worker, and then also does like delivery for like coal and ice, because again this is early 19 teens, so coal for heat, ice for like refrigeration and all of those kinds of things. Anyone know what a hopper is when it comes to like ice? Yeah, they like chops it up and all that kind of stuff with it. As an ice block is going into the hopper, it doesn't chop correctly and splinters start going, and Ellison's father gets impaled in his stomach and his abdomen by shards of ice and kills him when he's 3 years old, when Ellison is 3 years old. So at that point is when the family moves, his mother moves, remarries multiple times, but they ultimately settle in Gary, Indiana. But his father was big literary, big into reading, loved Ralph Waldo Emerson so far as content. And one of the big things that Emerson writes about, not Ellison, but one of the big things that Emerson writes about is self-reliance, which ends up kind of being a theme that shows up a big part in Invisible Man. And guess what? There's going to be a character named No. Emerson is going to show up, and Emerson also has a son, Emerson. It's like Siddhartha. So Ellison kind of works that idea of self-reliance into the book. Now, certainly, he didn't name him Ralph Waldo Emerson after self-reliance, knowing that he was going to die shortly thereafter. But that's certainly a concept that Ellison drives home within the point of the book. You do have a protagonist who is invisible. Okay, he is unnamed. Can you see him? Absolutely. And conversations take place. I mean, the kid is growing up. He goes to college. He graduates from high school. He's big with speeches. He goes to college. Job and all that kind of stuff. His name never gets used throughout the course of the book. So he has a name, but it's never, Nick says to Jay or anything like that. He is the narrator throughout. One of the things that's fairly impressive about the book is Ellison does a really good job of writing it where it doesn't seem like the name ever needs to show up. There's not like that really awkward, and Morgan, the other guy said, that you don't have that kind of confusion with language awkwardness or whatnot. So he does a pretty deft job of allowing it to work. He does not feel that he is truly seen or recognized, and he explains that in the prologue. For the most part, the book is one big flashback. So it's going to start off in quote-unquote present day in the 1950s for Invisible Man, and then it's going to be a flashback to about 25 years before, and it's working its way up to where it starts. So there's a prologue, there's an epilogue. Those things will be happening in real time. Everything else is kind of a build-up as to how they got into the situation that he currently finds himself in. So the opening chapter is fairly kind of philosophical in some way. The fact that he's smoking reefer probably doesn't help in explaining some weird dreams that are going on, but then you're kind of getting this lead up into everything that's happening. The protagonist in Ellison is African American, so you're really kind of looking at this, post-Civil War, pre-Civil Rights Movement kind of era as to how the narrator feels essentially, just kind of lost, not recognized by anyone. That's by whites. That's also by fellow blacks. So it's not solely, here are the issues that African Americans were facing, but I think it's more of you have a black author and a black narrator, but it's still an American novel. If that kind of makes sense. It's not meant to be solely for one specific demographic or anything like that. All right, since we did that little spiel, now we'll go back. You get your trailer right away. Ooh. 2 weeks to read and trailer from the get-go? Like a real film? Not that I've ever seen. Those are light bulbs. That's the prologue. So that's where you start. So you got your narrator. He's in his home, which is underground, and he has a lot of. How many does he have? Look at that. Virginia's already on top of things. She knows it's 1,369.
How'd you know that?
This is impressive.
Oh!
Now, did you notice her condescending tone? You didn't call her out.
What was her condescending tone?
It's on the paper.
No, that was just like stating a fact.
No, you do not apologize at all. Now, in reality, here, like, and he's going to do a description of it with the 1,369, where he talks about the goal really is that the whole ceiling is covered, all of the walls are covered, even the floor is covered. So he is enveloping himself essentially in all of these light bulbs. I doubt there's even 1,369 within the picture. This is a photograph that was kind of set up. It's not you were asking about film. It's not like it's a still shot coming from a movie. But he lives underground. No one knows that he's there, so he's going to kind of give you that little bit of a setup too within the opening. So initially you're dealing with a grown man, but then you're going to go back to roughly when he's about 18 years old. Obviously, I mentioned that there's a lot of motifs that get used throughout the course of the book. There are also a ton of allusions that are going to be happening throughout the book. Some are going to be literary, some are going to be more historical. Yes, there'll be some religious, but it's not like Flannery O'Connor, getting thrust into here as well. A-push folks, by the end of chapter 1, there should be a pretty significant allusion that you're going to be picking up on. Non-A-push folks, there's still going to be a significant allusion that you should be picking up on as we do some stuff over the next couple of weeks as you're getting there. So, allusions are certainly going to be another main thing to kind of keep an eye on. But this is how you start, underground, no one knows he's there. And that way he's also kind of invisible since people don't recognize that, hey, this person is in his little abode. Yeah, like going into the depths. And so basically, like it starts, again, in that quote unquote present day where he's here. He's a little bit of a hermit, kind of in a way. And the book is kind of leading up to what makes that happen. But yeah, essentially, he goes into a manhole cover when it's all said and done and descends down into the depths. Music folk, there's a lot of musical elements that are going to be in here as well, whether it be allusions that are happening with specific songs. Ellison is a musician more so probably than he is a writer, and I think his writing style tends to be very kind of rhythmic and whatnot as you're reading it. So you might be able to kind of pick up on some of those things. So Virginia will never forget the amount of light bulbs. That's going to stick in her head for the rest of her life, and you're always going to remember his middle name. Everyone else, I don't know what you'll remember, but we'll figure that out. You know what you're going to remember? Not yet. We'll find out. I already mentioned this part too. The father's construction worker dies when Ellison is 3 years old. So him and a younger brother and the mother end up hopping around a little bit, moving from place to place. She's usually working multiple jobs, as domestic service maid kind of thing. And Ellison's working a lot of different jobs to kind of help the household and whatnot. She does remarry a few times actually, but the last time that she remarries, does end up kind of settling down. When she's involved with radical political movements. I purposely said radical as opposed to like stating something specific. Any guesses as to what would constitute radical political movements in the teens and 20s and even into the 30s and 40s? Yes, but that's not what she's kind of going with. There certainly is civil rights movements that are kind of starting to build. The suffrage part, not so like with women's suffrage, that's not part of what she's getting into quite yet. So, no. Kind of like socialism, communism. 1920s is, remember, you have 1918, you have Bolshevik Revolution taking place, and there's kind of like a Red Scare that's happening in the 1920s. Communism, and socialism really start looking at African Americans as a big target audience. Which, if you're African American in the 1910s or 20s, what's going to speak kind of about socialism? That could sound somewhat appealing. the idea of equality, fair share, things of that nature, where, in the country that we're in, there's not really necessarily that fair share equality. Yes, legally things have changed, since the Civil War, but certainly equality for all is not really kind of taking place. And so this is something that his mother gets involved in. This is something that Ellison gets involved in, but he really becomes upset with the Communist Party post-World War II. And in a lot of ways, you have a group, an organization in the book, and you're not going to come across it in the first 195, but more in that middle section, the Brotherhood is really kind of looked as being an allusion to the Communist Party and why Ellison is so upset about it. Ellison himself, in 1933, he gets into Tuskegee Institute. Tuskegee Institute is probably one of the more famous all-black colleges. Tuskegee Institute is founded by Booker T. Washington, who we're going to be taking a look at his Atlanta Exposition address. Some of you already have with A-Push, but if you haven't, we're going to be taking a look at that on Thursday and Friday. It's a very much a world-renowned school. Johnny, do you know when the school opens? About 1885, I would say, would be when it starts. Washington's dead by 1933. Ellison goes to it in 1933. Washington dies in 1915, in 1915, I believe. But it's world-renowned black school. It is really focuses on agriculture, labor, the idea that you're going to be able to build yourself up economically, and by working through economics, you're going to be appreciated and desired from a financial aspect. It has also a very renowned music program. Ellison plays the trumpet. And so in 1933, guess what there's an opening for in the school band? Trumpet player, that's his way to kind of get into it. But he basically has to hobo from Indiana to Tuskegee in order to get there. And when he gets to Tuskegee, he even still feels that he's kind of being not discriminated necessarily against, but there's certainly social class stratospheres that are there, and he doesn't really kind of feel as if he fits in. So one of the things that's going to be happening throughout the course of the book is you're taking a look at how he feels invisible. In some ways, it's certainly going to be autobiographical, where he kind of feels invisible, not only when dealing with whites, but it could be fellow African Americans. It can certainly be dealing with age and things like that. By the time 36 rolls around, he's running low on cash, on funds, so he goes to New York City to work for a little bit so he can make money, and then he can finish off his senior year. So he's been in school for 3 years, goes to New York City in 1936, but he doesn't come back. He never really goes back to finish Tuskegee. How many light bulbs? 396. No one really knows what the number is. How does he come up with it? Is there any kind of reason? Some people wonder if it has to do with because that's when he moves to New York City, so he just kind of flipped the 9 and the 3 in order to come up with the light bulbs and all that stuff. Don't know if that's the case or not. We'll have to have a seance or something and channel in Ralph Ellison and ask him.
Like most of those things are just like, hey, let's come up with it.
Probably, but Libby's going to ask why at some point, so we got to at least kind of have an answer ready to go.
Well, on numbers, Libby felt odd about his life.
6.
Oh no. Alright, I'm done.
3 of the 4 numbers are odd. 3 is also odd, so maybe he felt.
They're all multiples of 3, and maybe he felt like he was 1. Is that not a like 3 divided by 3 is 1? So it's like 5.
Should I share this conversation with Mrs. King later today, or just?
Yes.
Or Mrs. Everhart, maybe. Addie has a math test today. I don't know. Her last quiz was a 9 out of 22, Morgan. It didn't go well. But the teacher said, she's such a hard worker, she can take it again.
What did Mrs. Payne say?
Good. You're lucky you got to take it again. Test corrections. I don't know. When he goes to New York City, he becomes very well acquainted with Richard Wright, Langston Hughes. I bet Langston Hughes you probably have read some poetry for with Harlem Renaissance. I Too Sing America. I'm drawing a blank on a couple other poems that I had in my head. But he's certainly well-renowned for a poet. Richard Wright, well-known author as well. So these would be two leading figures within the Harlem Renaissance that would be taking place, which is where Ellison is when he goes to New York City. These two certainly encourage him, not saying stop playing music, but they certainly encourage him to do writing. Richard Wright has a couple like newspaper publications that he's involved with, and Ellison kind of ends up being an editor for him, starts doing some short stories, and that really kind of pushes his literary career. The big thing for him is he finds out I can make a little bit more money doing this than I can playing music, and so that's really what kind of is fueling this desire as well. But overall, throughout his career, very, very artsy in the sense that writer, musician, sculptor, photographer, also educator, so he's certainly a well-rounded individual. 1937 publishes his first short story, Jaime's Bull. This is kind of playing off of his hoboing career that he had, going from home to Tuskegee. And really kind of starts going from there. But from 37 to 44, a lot of articles, short stories, reviews, things of that nature. Obviously, social equality, as one would expect, and justice ends up being a concern of Ellison and something that he really writes about, and that's going to be happening with Invisible Man. Mentioned here, brief stint with the Communist Party. Richard Wright is a person who's really involved with socialism, Communist Party, and so that's how Ellison kind of gets pulled into it. But as I mentioned, by the time World War II rolls around, he's very upset and kind of feels detached from Communist Party, so moves away from it. It's not really something that ever truly kind of motivates, changes political beliefs for him. He's more, trying to fix what we have as opposed to trying to come up with something brand new. He gets married in 1946. This is actually his second marriage, but he then stays married to Fanny McConnell throughout. But she is a well-known. He's initially married to an actress, and then Fanny McConnell is educator, and it gives him opportunity, some financial freedom to start working with Invisible Man. So Invisible Man, he's working on from 46, ultimately gets published in 1952. By no means am I going that it's the same kind of text, because it's not, but this would be the same time as like Catcher in the Rye would be going on. Like these would be two books that would be getting released pretty much at the same time. As mentioned, we're going to be certainly taking a look at identity, since he's the Invisible Man. So exploring man's place, identity within society. That can be historical, biographical, and there's also going to be some allegorical aspects to it. So the idea that multiple people would be able to relate to it. When you think of racism, 1920s, 30s, 40s, I think we kind of tend to think of Southern racism. He's going to be exploring both of those. The book, after the prologue, when it does its flashback, it's going to go to the South, and then you're going to have the narrator working his way where he moves up north to New York City. So you have a student who goes to an all-black college in the South, and then ends up moving to New York City after his junior year. Ellison, remember, Tuskegee, after his junior year, comes up north to New York City. So there's certainly, as I mentioned, going to be some of those biographical kind of details that are going to work its way into it. When this thing gets published, when the book gets published, immediately it is hot off the presses. It is getting a lot of acclaim, a lot of accolades. It's published in 52. It's National Book Award in 1953. Ellison starts going on like a world tour for the book. A lot of the 50s, he's living in Rome and Paris as he's doing a lot of speaking tours in various places, and he's becoming like very much literary connected. So, hey, first big publication, this is the one that's really getting him going. Now, again, he did a lot of things prior to it, but this is the first novel of his that gets published, and it's the only novel of his that gets published within his lifetime. He dies in 94. His second novel gets published after his death in 99, 5 years later. It's not really the way that he wanted it to be, but it was the way that the estate, the literary executor, decided, hey, we're going to publish this. If you're going to write one book, it'll be good. All you do is write one more essay. That'll be your best one. Back to the chapter, right?
Yeah.
Those were the good old days. Mentioned international kind of literary icon following his publication. So he travels abroad and doesn't come back to the United States until 1958.
it's not that he does this due to McCarthyism and the Red Scare that you have in the 1950s, but it's pretty good timing on his part. So he is out of the country when Senator McCarthy from Wisconsin is doing the Red Scare, communist kind of attacks that would be happening. Certainly when you have Ellison, being involved with writing, because Hollywood writers, directors, playwrights, screenwriters, all those folks end up really kind of taking the brunt of McCarthy's criticism. The fact that Ellison would have communist ties wouldn't really be good for him from earlier in his past. So it's a good time for him to kind of be out. But there's nothing that has led people to believe that that's why Ellison is leaving the country, more because of the invitations that are happening. When he comes back in 1958, he accepts a university-level teaching position at Bard College, and he is pretty much teaching from the 50s through most of the 80s. Bard College in New York is a place where he's teaching. He's doing American and Russian literature. So Ralph Ellison, we could be teaching you Ralph Ellison. In Virginia could go, why do you think there's 1,369 light bulbs? And you think he could say, because that's the number I chose. Deal with it. Or you could go, I bet that the narrator really, you're wrong. Or frustrating.
English professors that use their own work like in college.
You could just wise John to say
I heard horrible things from my professors.
What's that? Vonnegut died in 2007.
That's crazy.
That was the year I started teaching the book. Like, he was alive. Like, we picked it, and then he died. So I thought about then teaching Twilight the next year. I was like, hey, if I'm going to knock off writers.
Mr. Kane, that's so mean.
Well, no, she agrees with that one. That wasn't an insult to anyone in here. I don't even know. So Bard College, Yale, Rutgers, those are all places where Ellison is teaching, and he is regarded, Ethan, as being pretty good at what he does with it, so I don't know if he ever taught his book or not. The other novel that he's working on, at this time is Juneteenth. He has a major house fire in '67, so he loses pages upon pages upon pages of the manuscript. And obviously Google Docs is not around at that time. So he's starting, from square one all over again. And ultimately, as I said, the book does get published 5 years after his death in 1999. But to say that it's the way that he actually wanted it to be would probably not be the case. So dies of pancreatic cancer, 1994. Obituary talks about, educator, writer, sculptor, photographer, musician. So certainly a very filling life that would be taking place at that point. Some things within the book. All right, the first chapter, so not prologue, but chapter number 1, Battle Royale chapter, is kind of like a short story beforehand. So the book kind of gets built around that. I mentioned Catcher in the Rye. Catcher in the Rye was built around the Holden and Sally date when they go ice skating, and the rest of the novel comes around it. This one, early on, is built around chapter 1, one of the fairly intense ones. There's going to be a lot of social, intellectual issues facing African Americans, where you're dealing with how do we try to get equality, how are we looking for recognition, even though legally it is there in a lot of ways, but it's not necessarily being granted. So that chapter is going to be a pretty good way of kind of setting the tone for what the conflicts are that the narrator is going to be facing. Your sign-out sheets, just leave them on the desk, table, I'll pick them up, we're good to go. So tomorrow we get to go back to the good old days of TV casting, so rest easy, get excited, yes.
We're at a solid.
You too.
Thank you.